You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cricket Podcast. England have made it to the end of day 3. That's good. Everything else was bad. Everything else was bad. Well, apart from Root and Malan before lunch. If you're an Australian, flip that round. I mean, it's disappointing that you've let England get to the end of day 3. That's incredibly poor from you. But that's the only downside on what has been an excellent day's cricket for the Aussies. I am Jack Hope. I am joined by two people today. Firstly, Dan Weston, cricket analyst Dan Weston, who has had computer trouble. How have you at least enjoyed the cricket? Has the cricket taken the edge off the computer problems?
Yeah, it has. It hasn't sorted my bank balance out from buying a new computer, but yeah, it's good enough.
And Maximus Rowe Brown, to use his full name, in a cupboard, I think.
Hey?
Are you in a cupboard?
I'm in a cupboard. No, I'm not. I'm in the room that I'm always in, Jack.
Okay. Well, maybe the camera angle from where I'm looking at you over Zoom.
No, I've got a window.
Oh,
See?
all right. Yeah, cupboards do rarely have windows.
Yeah.
It would be a very special cupboard. Max, we're going to get into the cricket in a minute, but first you're going to give our listeners some messages while I turn off my tumble dryer.
Okay. Message number 1: England are very poor at cricket. Message number 2: please like and subscribe to us on YouTube, to this video. Click the bell icon to keep up to date with updates, and head over to Twitter and Instagram at the Cricket Pod and follow us there. And if you would like to support us, then it's patreon.com/the Cricket Pod, where you can ask some questions, which we will definitely answer on the pod. You can get access to ball by ball IPL data and other such goodies.
Absolutely. We always do this at the end of the show, but maybe we're going to switch it around and do this first. Dan, where can people find you?
I am on Twitter at SAAdvantage, and if you want to read a lot about cricket strategy, you can check out my Substack, danweston.substack.com.
Great. Let's get on with the show. Max, as always, we start with the summary of the day's play. Is there a theme to today's summary, or can you not muster the effort?
There's a theme today. The theme is sort of just kind of my morning, really. My Saturday morning. It's been a long week, Jack. It's been a long week. I've had COVID, battling the illness. So being locked inside, I had a nice early night last night. Relaxed and went to bed, and I stirred at around 7:30 this morning, well rested, and rolled over to check my phone and look at the score. England 140 for 2 at lunch. David Malan and Joe Root on 50s, and I was encouraged as I closed my eyes for another snooze. Fast forward half an hour, the door knocks, and Amazon delivery man delivers package number 35 of the week. This morning, it was a pack of shortbreads that a friend sent me to make me feel better about having COVID. That was a very nice surprise. Having stirred and woken up, got out of bed and gone back to bed, I turned on BT Sport to tune in to Joss Buttler wafting wildly outside off stump to slip to leave England 169 for 6. England can't bat, TM. Ollie Pope can't play spin, TM. There was a brief fight back from Wokes and Stokes, and England were all out for 236, which left them 240 odd behind, there or thereabouts. Australia decided to bat and pound England's noses into the dirt a little bit more. And they obviously took pity on England because the only wicket we could muster was David Warner running himself out. And it's bad when David Warner is taking pity on you.
Yeah, it was. But it's again, Dave Warner provides the silver lining, though. We said this on day 1, didn't we, when he was out on 95. We were like, it could have been worse. Yeah. Dave Warner could have got a time. It could have been worse today. Dave Warner could be not out. At least we've got one moment of, one comic relief. You see, in films that are quite gloomy or quite serious, often there'll be a character inserted to provide a bit of comic relief, so that it is not just an onslaught of, dire circumstance after dire circumstance for the protagonist. So there's somebody there to add a little bit of brevity. Dave Warner has been that in this Test match. He has been the comedy sidekick to the England terrible cricket performance straight man. It also feels, what's this, the 7th Ashes show we've done? I think the 6th I've been on. Have you heard the Greek myth Sisyphus and his rock? I think he's a demigod, Sisyphus.
I'm not quite up to speed on the Greek mythology, Jack. So if you could regale us with that tale, that would be good.
His task is to roll a spherical rock boulder up a mountain, and so he does it every day. And obviously, it goes up, runs out of energy or whatever, and it tumbles all the way back down to the bottom of the hill, and he has to go again. Hence the phrase, the Sisyphean rock. This is our Sisyphean rock. These Ashes podcasts, this England team. It's we can use more. Groundhog Day. They go on.
It's quite right, Jack. It's the bit that I didn't put in the other sort of route I was thinking of going down with the summary, but it was only about 2 lines long, so I ditched it. Was that I have a newfound respect for cricket commentators and analysts, because we've done, like you say, 7 episodes and counting now, talking about how bad England are, and they've been doing it for years. They've been rolling this rock up this mountain for a long old time, and I'm after. This is 7 days in, and I'm wondering what we're going to say that's new here.
I'm sure we'll find some stuff. Dan, what we've been doing on the more recent podcast, rather than just doing a run through the day, we've been talking about sort of man of the day. Of the day. I think man of the day was 2 people, or could have been 2 people. Mitchell Starc, I think, or perhaps Gary Lyon. Who would you go with, and why?
I would have gone with Mitchell Starc, and I also want to give extra bit of credit to Cameron Green, because I think that a few people have unfairly maligned him, and I think he's actually going to turn out to be a very, very, very good player. And also just setting it up for tomorrow's man of the day, could it be Marcus Harris?
Imagine that. That could be good. Yeah. Stark got some crucial breakthroughs. Green got the big one. I mean, getting Root out's worth about 4 of any, literally worth 4 of any other English batter.
Stokes, that's good enough, right?
Yeah. Right. So there we go. Let's say man of the day, Stark. Honourable mention to Green. And now let's transport time travel back to lunchtime, because England, Max, as you said, did have the best of the first session of the day, didn't they? They
123 runs for no wicket in the first session. That is as much of a victory of a session as you could want. They didn't lose a wicket. They actually scored some runs at a reasonable rate. Root and Malan looked solid, like not really troubled, played good shots. The bowlers looked, Richardson wasn't really doing anything with it. The ball wasn't doing a lot. The batsman looked on top, and it was like we were seeing that fight back that we saw in Brisbane, and just like we saw in Brisbane, the fight back ended after a little break. It was like it was Brisbane in microcosm, really, wasn't it?
It kind of really was. Root, for a few of the Aussie bowlers. I mean, we speculated, didn't we, that Pat Cummins being out and Hazelwood being out could put some pressure on Australia, and I think that did sort of tell a little bit. I wasn't that impressed with Jai Richardson's bowling. I thought it was a little bit too erratic, probably for the level he's supposed to be playing at. And
the spell he had last night as well, I think the commentators were oohing and ahhing about it because he was beating the bat a lot, but he was bowling too short. Like people were talking about England bowling too short in the first test. He was bowling too short. He was not threatening to take wickets. He was bowling that aesthetically pleasing line and length that you're not going to get any runs off, but you're not going to take any wickets. And I think he suffered from that a bit.
And after the greatest day of Michael Neeser's life, he had a bit of a coming back down to earth, didn't he? I don't think he picked up another wicket. Had to bowl quite a few overs. Not much joy. So England, you go into lunch 333 behind, and you're thinking, oh yeah, we're back in the game. And then it does go wrong. Dan, after lunch, Cameron Green, you talked about him. You said honourable mention. He gave Root a real going over and fully deserved that wicket, didn't he?
Yeah, and like I said before, he's someone I've been watching for 2 or 3 years now. As someone with massive potential, particularly in red ball cricket. I think there's so much to like about a batter who can bowl by 80 miles an hour, basically, at this level. And numbers-wise, his numbers in domestic cricket are excellent. So it's always going to be a matter of time, I think, before he translated that success to Test cricket. I like him a lot. I think he's got a pretty big future.
90 miles an hour and from about 2.3 meters as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's
ridiculous. Yeah.
What I quite like about him is that he kind of sort of knows when to give it full welly and not, because you see him float around or bowl spells where he's sort of in the 130s. And then to Root, I guess he realised he was making the ball talk a little bit. I guess he thought just after a break here, maybe I've got the opportunity to pick up a vital wicket, but as they try and get themselves back in. And he cranked it up a little bit, and he got Root in that area that you can get Root in, which is the top of off area. I mean, it's a weakness common to virtually every batter in the world. But Root, particularly after breaks, I think, does push at the ball. He likes to feel bat on ball, doesn't he? He likes to guide the ball down to third man, and I think that's what was in his head when he went at that one.
It looked like it, yeah. It's that sort of your strength being your weakness kind of thing.
Yeah, it was a little bit like that. Green, he'd already beaten the edge a couple of times. You could sort of see it coming. I think the question was whether he had the quality to keep it in that area for long enough that he could generate a genuine chance. And the answer was yes. After quite a difficult start bowling wise in international cricket, he does look like he could be the real deal in terms of that. Well, let's call him a bowling all-rounder.
So far.
The irony is that on the evidence of this series, you'd call him a bowling all-rounder.
Yeah.
But on the evidence of domestic cricket, you would probably say he's a batting all-rounder or genuine all-rounder.
Yeah.
So obviously his batting hasn't fired in this series so far, but the amount of runs he's got, I mean, his dominance of Sheffield Shield is Ollie Pope-esque in terms of the dominance of domestic cricket. So,
well, to be honest, if he could bowl like that and he could only average 33 in Test cricket and bat 6, he'd still be pretty useful. He'd still basically be Ben Stokes, wouldn't he? I'm
actually gonna make a prediction before you even brought Stokes into the discussion. I'll make a prediction that in 10 years' time, Cameron Green will have at least as good, if not better, numbers in Test cricket than Ben Stokes.
Well, when we get you back on the podcast in 10 years' time.
If he plays England enough, he'll be fine.
Well, yeah.
I think that is an advantage. That is an advantage for some Australian players, isn't it? You know, Shane Warne stat-padded his entire career against England in the 90s. And then people are like, oh, he's better than Murali. Murali played Zimbabwe. And it's like, come on. Zimbabwe were beating England for fun. Go on, Max.
We wouldn't even travel to Zimbabwe. We were so scared of losing.
I reckon the England team would lose to Zimbabwe away. There's a good chance.
I'd love to see it. I was just going to say, I think there's a slight danger now after it's only 2 tests and 2 wickets, but there's a slight danger of Cameron Green becoming a guy who could kind of have the wool over Joe Root a little bit with that with the extra bounce and lift he gets and that attacking the outside off stump. Root trying to feel bat on ball with a little bit of extra bounce. I think there's a risk that we could see a few more repeats of that wicket. We've already seen it twice. And it is a danger. So I think wouldn't be surprised if we see Cameron Green coming on to try and get Joe Root out when he's hit 50 a few times this series.
New Cummins,
assuming he gets there again.
Yeah. We should speak about Root. Root's 183 runs from having the outright lead for most runs in a calendar year. He's behind Graham Smith in 2008, Richards in 1976 or 79, and Yunus Khan, I think 2011. 3 innings to do it. Will he or not, Dan?
I think there's a decent chance. He's certainly going to get all 3 innings to do it because there's no way he's going to bat 1 innings.
Well, either that or he'll have got a double ton.
Yeah. But I also want to say, like, from that perspective, what an unbelievable achievement it is when you put it into the context that he's either threatening or will do this when only one other batter for England in the whole year has got a ton. I mean,
or is that more like how bad are England that they've got a batsman who's going to possibly score the most runs in the calendar year ever, and we're going to lose all the time?
I mean, Ed Smith's weighted average computer must be having an absolute meltdown because it's going to be so good.
I'm sorry, lads. We've broken the formula. Joe Root's weighted average is infinity.
He has been outrageously good. You have to bear in mind as well. It's he's gone away to Sri Lanka, away to India, at home to India, at home to New Zealand, and away to Australia. So he's played 3 of the 4 best bowling attacks in the world. Yeah. And Sri Lanka are no mugs in their own backyard either. Like they're difficult places. That's a difficult place to go and score runs. And he's scored. Yeah, it would be great if he could get 1 more ton, I think, before the year's over. Because to have done centuries in England, India, and Australia in a year, that would just be phenomenal.
I want to do it for comedy value as well, because I mean, you look at the list of players who have probably hit this milestone or considerable amount of runs in a calendar year, Test cricket. Their team's probably got a really high win percentage in general. All these other players have probably got a massive win percentage. Root's was going to be like win percentage going to be like half of anybody else who scored like a significant amount of runs in Test cricket.
I mean, Joe Root should be on the nomination list for Sports Personality of the Year, and because England are so bad, he's nowhere near it.
The thing is, very few people in the population can see matches on BT Sport. That's the problem.
Well, and they're in the middle of the night, aren't they? He was on Channel 4 a bit, wasn't he, earlier in there? He got that double ton on Channel 4, but I guess that wasn't good enough.
No reason to bias.
Okay, so Root goes. David Malan. This was one of the best pieces of analysis I think I've ever seen. We'll get at tea after the claps. Matt Pryor and Alistair Cook were talking about this, and they almost said this verbatim, that Joe Root is so good that when he gets out, he makes the rest of the team collapse. Like that, their reasoning for why everyone else is so bad is that Joe Root's so good, he's like intimidating them, or they just completely lose confidence when they're like, oh, Joe's out, now what can we possibly do? England go from 150 for 2 to, they're 236 all out, but the damage is done by T. Mitchell Starc is the other person to really get amongst it. He gets Malan, who played a weird cut shot to Steve Smith.
That was just a bad shot, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then picks up Butler as well. Starc, with this pink ball, is... Right, here's a question. Axar Patel or Starc with the pink ball? Max, who are you going for?
As in who's better?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, surely it depends where you're playing.
All right, cop out.
But I mean, well, it does, doesn't it? You can't answer that. Like,
well, we felt
if it's in India, it's Axar Patel, and if it's in Australia, it's Mitchell Starc.
England have felt the full force of both, as Starc ran through this afternoon. It's supposed to be easier in that middle session. With the pink ball,
yeah, that was the other. That was the other ridiculous thing, wasn't it? We batted out the first session, which against a new ball and fresh bowlers, which is supposedly tricky, and then the easy bit, we just fucked.
Yeah, well put. Starc was really good though, Dan, wasn't he? He's just rediscovered his mojo after averaging 96 against India, and is terrorising England.
Yeah, I think maybe it's to do with Shane Warne saying he wants to make his first pick at London Spirit. Now he knows he's got the backing of Warne. He's terrorising England.
The last thing he needed to
the final piece of the jigsaw. Yeah. And on that subject of Starc versus Axar Patel with the pink ball, I mean, obviously Axar Patel's numbers are ridiculous, but I think Stark's probably more sustainable. I mean, I don't think many batters are going to be queuing up to face him in the pink ball.
I think that's his 36.
I'd rather face Axar Patel.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think he's taken like 36 wickets in 6 pink ball tests or something like that. He's got an awesome record. The most wickets taken in day-night tests, and you can sort of see why, because it's one of the things about him. I'm not 100% sure he knows where the ball's going to go. He knows it's going to be quite quick and it will probably swing. And I reckon he's got like a general idea that it's got to go sort of towards the batter. But I don't know if he's not like a precision bowler in the way that Pat Cummins is, for example. And I reckon with the pink ball, when it's doing something, that's almost an advantage because the batter's got no clue what's about to come out. You've got all these variables. You've got the light. You've got a different colour ball. You've got a bowler.
It's like a slightly more refined Mitchell Johnson.
It is, yeah. It's like they took Mitchell Johnson. They were like, "What if we just got rid of the worst 20% of balls
Yeah,
he bowled?"
we're just going to narrow the variance slightly.
He was really good again today. I do think this England lineup is built for him as well. You've got left-handed Rory Burns opening the batting, who's not very good against left-arm pace. Then Malan, also another left-hander at 2. Then you've got Butler, who averages sub 30 against pace, with probably a couple of others thrown in. I mean, I think Stokes has got a bit of a patchy record against left-arm pace too.
Well, you got Stuart Broad, who doesn't like short balls. Chris Wokes, who doesn't like short balls.
Then you have that down the order too. So he's got a pretty usable game plan to 7 of the 11, and by usable I mean he just has to bowl. He doesn't have to do anything special.
Doesn't have to think too hard.
Yeah. It's just run in and send it.
Do what you do.
Direction. And he'll pick up wickets against this team. But yeah, I mean I think Root's probably got the game to get on top of him, and we have seen that at times, but nobody else does. Where do we want to go next in the collapse? I know we can't do them all. People have been asking us about Ollie Pope.
Poor guy.
Yeah, I don't really. So he's the next man.
Bambi on ice.
He's the next man on that. Right. We probably need to talk about this a little bit. The man playing spin is so out of his depth that it's ridiculous. Now, Lyon was getting the ball to spin and to bounce, but it was the kind of nice, you never really want it. If you're batting, you don't want to see it spinning and bouncing as much as it was. But it wasn't like the Akshay Patel spin and bounce that we saw. It wasn't completely random where the ball was going. It was spinning and it was bouncing. So you had to play it like.
And it wasn't actually. It wasn't often attacking the stumps either because of that bounce. If it was a bit back at the length, it probably wasn't going to bowl you. And if it was, full enough to bowl you could get forward to it. But I think he got the guys around. He had 4 men around the bat. Australia know he's the man under pressure against the spin. Those 4 men around the bat clearly got into his head, and he tried to take them out of the game by edging it straight into one of their hands.
He didn't even edge it; he just hit it.
Well, no, he sort of spooned it up, didn't he?
Yeah, it was. It was a really weird dismissal. Right? So the ball before he was given out on the field by the umpire. Who thought it was bat pad. It turned out to be his arm onto his pad. But even that, so I think Pope's big problem against spin, and I've talked about this before, is he just does not pick up the length very well at all. So the ball before he'd gone down the wicket to a delivery that he should have been way back to. It would have bounced clearly over the stumps. Yeah, it was going to spin. It would have been an awkward delivery to play, but you can turn that round the corner. You can sort of let it hit you. You're probably not going to be out if you go back to it. It's not going to hit the stumps. You're not going to get pinned LBW. You don't need to worry about that. The only way you can be out is if you turn it into leg slips hands, which would be a bit unfortunate to do, to be honest. He is nearly out. He's given out. Obviously, he reviews it. It isn't out. And the next ball, I think in his head, he's like, well, I think he makes the assessment you just made. There's men round the bat. I've got to do something about this. So he aimlessly runs down the wicket, and it is pretty aimless. It's not. He's not going anywhere. He's not got a plan. He's just running down the wicket. He's like, I'm going to try and hit this into the leg side.
He's trying to come up with a plan.
When the ball isn't there, he doesn't have any backup. He's just like, I'm just going to go through with this anyway. I decided I was going to run down the wicket. It's a bit shorter than I expected. Yeah. So do I kick it? It's not going to hit the stumps. Do I defend from here? No, I'll just go through with the shot and hope for the best. And it's very difficult to have an entire. It's not even like left arm spin or right arm spin or leg spin. It's just spin. Like all spin. Yeah. It's very difficult to be a functioning international player.
50% of the kinds of bowling.
if one entire branch of bowling,
not ideal.
You just can't deal with.
He was clearly trying to come up with a plan to get over it, but there's not much good trying to come up with a plan when you don't have the information required to make a good plan. Someone needs to just sit him down or stand him in the net and just be like,
send him on a long trip to India.
I don't know, get the Lions to tour India, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh for 3 years, stick him in there and just be like, learn it.
Dan, I've got a question for you as someone who is an analyst. Presumably when you've got players on your team who have a weakness like this, because the cricketers do, they have types of bowling they're not good against or whatever. What is it that you try? What is it you can do to try and cover up such a glaring flaw in the game? Is it as simple as send them on a tour to India, or well, not as simple as that, but is it as extreme as having to send them on a tour to India, or can you do things to adapt their game?
I think that it really depends on your environment. So in a franchise tournament, for example, you don't have a lot of time to work with players technically, and so that's where the recruitment side of things is massive in terms of you don't want to recruit a player with such glaring weaknesses unless they're extremely strong in one area and you've got a matchup breaker or shield in to protect them from that weakness. Then that's always it comes to roster construction, team building, etc. But obviously in England's context, it's slightly different. Now, obviously, we know that Ollie Pope's played county cricket for a good few years, and I think when I was last on the pod, Jack, you mentioned about there seems to be this maybe a lack of joined up thinking between. With I think it might be Sibley as an example as well in terms of the range of shots that he lacks, and there's no plan that once they get him in the England setup, what do they do to kind of work on those weaknesses and make them a more rounded Test player? And this is, I think we're going to probably talk about this a little bit later on, but I'm not really sure what the management group does to help these players or to improve them. And you talk about rolling the stone up the hill, and you mentioned about Groundhog Day as well, and obviously that was a film. And I'm thinking at the moment, this current English tour, maybe it's more akin to another film, which would be Ron Manager. I don't know if you've seen that one.
No.
It was like Ricky Tomlinson was the England manager from like some guy who was basically
I have seen this. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I have no clue whatsoever. It does kind of remind me a bit of this at the moment. Like there's just seems no joined up thinking. There's no strategy from my perspective. What anyone's sort of embracing. No marginal gains. No that and certainly an England management group that seems to be very unwilling to employ non-high profile ex-players as coaches. Yeah. Now, I think maybe one of the previous times I was on the pod when we talked about the Ashes, I said, when was the last time England had a batting coach that didn't have probably 50 plus caps to their country?
You got the answer yet?
No, because I don't have a list of them, but I'm pretty sure that it's a long list of players who have ex-players who have had a pretty strong playing career. And they just kind of walked into this job. But unfortunately, there's no real correlation between how good a player is as a player and how good they are as coach.
Yeah, which is a shame for England. But they're not going to learn. They're just, I don't know. It feels like this whole thing is just so easy for Australia. We're talking about Pope there and how there's a whole category of bowling he can't deal with. You could probably say the same for Hamid. I think just bowl pace at him and eventually he'll make a mistake. You could probably say the same for Buttler. Just bowl pace at him and eventually he'll make a mistake. Burns has, he's fucked in two situations by Australia. Not very good against left arm pace. He's not very good against spin. They have Lyon and Stark, so he's, what's he supposed to do to some extent? He's gonna have to.
And he's not very good against anyone for the first 10 balls.
Yeah, so it's doubled down, isn't it? He's got to deal with a type of bowling he can't play at the best of times, and he's got to play against that person when they're at their best, right at the beginning of his innings. Malan, he's played really well, but there are probably question marks around how good he is. He's still a bloke who's in his 30s who averages just over 30 now, thanks to the innings today in Test cricket.
Must be loving this. So he's only suitable to play in Australia, and he's come out and smashed it in Australia.
I'd be disappointed that he hasn't converted those though. Those 280 odds. I mean, one of those should be a ton. Like it's not. He hasn't been got out in either of those, really, has he?
I think England would have been grateful for any 80s at the moment in time. I think if you're being rolled for 236 with 4 batters scoring 200 between them, don't blame the guy who scored 80.
I think England's big problem here, though, is that we're talking about the types of bowling people can't deal with. Normally in Test cricket, when you talk about a batter's weakness, it's like in swing that's quite quick, or not very good against balls that seam a lot. It's not. It's not just like anyone who bowls fast. Just like any bowlers you've got that bowl over 85, then you'll get them out. That's what we're talking about with this England team. They've not got. You don't even need a game plan. You just need like two types of bowlers, fast and spin, and you rotate through them, and eventually you crack every single nut. There's not really any combination of batters except when Root is at the crease.
Jack.
Except when Root is at the crease, that where England can be like, it does, there's not a really obvious thing you can do here to get people out. I mean, England's plan against Labuschagne here is bowl bounces at him for about the first 30 balls, and you can see he's uncomfortable with that, and that might get wickets. That's a game plan. It's not just bowl anyone quick, which is what effectively the game plan is for three of these England batters.
Yeah, we're basically playing a very one-sided game of rock, paper, scissors, where England have only got scissors and Australia have got about 15 different types of rock.
Yeah, it's annoying. Right, anything else from the collapse? We don't have to go into it. Do you want to talk about the run out? It was funny. Who knows where they were going?
Well, the Warner Harris run out. Yeah, I enjoyed that Harris just was like, nah, you fuck this, mate. I'm going down the other end. Make your mind up.
To get some runs to play the next game. Yeah.
Yeah. Warner did the right thing. To be fair, he fell on his sword. He knew he'd messed up. So fair play to him for that. But England looked toothless, didn't they, in that session? Like
they were flat.
The kind of tiny bit of hope you might have had of the whole. This is what they're here for. Anderson Broad under the lights with the pink ball. This is why they're here. And they didn't look dangerous. Australia batted very well. They left well. They didn't have to play particularly well to see it off. But it was. We were required. 4 overs to go. We brought on our part-time off spinner. That tells you all you need to know about how things were going in that evening session. And they'd given up.
He looked pretty good. This is something I wanted to say.
He did look good.
While the morning was underway, Shane Dietz, who's been on our podcast before, as the ex-CEO of Vanuatu, and now he's with the Dutch women's team. He played 10 years for the South Australia at Adelaide Oval, and he sent me a message, and he basically couldn't believe unbelievable
that England hadn't picked a spinner.
Yeah. He was saying at Adelaide Oval, he's played there for 10 years. We play 2 a lot of the time. Even bad spinners are good, especially on days 3, 4, and 5. I think by bad spinners he might mean Bess or
Joe
Leach
Root.
there. Yeah, it's not. Well, yeah, but it's the point. It's not quite Ahmedabad bad, but it is. This information is freely available to go and look at. It's not rocket science, but it's again they've got
complex algorithm or anything like that.
It's a bloke that knows a guy that we know.
I mean, like, you can get this stuff off Stats Guru. It's not difficult.
I think England as well with the side they brought over and then sending all the Lions home. Like, we only brought Leach
and Bess
and Leach and well. Did we actually bring Bess?
Yeah.
As in the Lions, though?
No, he was in the real squad, which is why he's
in the real squad?
Yeah.
Oh,
the Lions took some England players to over.
I can't believe we're still bringing Bess. Right, that's just,
the thing is, right, this is where I've got such issues with this spin strategy. I actually don't mind England not picking what...
I hate it here.
No, okay, so I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit here, and I'm gonna in a very rare turn of events, back up England's Test cricket thinking. Okay, so we know that Leach really struggles against left-handers. Okay, Australia have 4 in the top 7. So realistically, because England don't seem to be have worked out how to get Leach more effective against left-handers, you can't pick him. Okay, right?
To some extent, but you do have Root. So you have a spinner that you can use.
Yeah, 100%. And this is why I'm saying that Root is sufficient.
But I'm saying he isn't because
compared to Bess, because actually Root's numbers in Test cricket aren't that much worse than Dominic Bess's.
Well,
and I think that he's extremely serviceable as a spinner. And I don't.
I
think
agree
that
with you.
there's not enough of a gap between Bess and Root to say, oh, we'll pick two.
Sure, I understand that, and I wouldn't have picked Bess either. I'd have probably, based on who they have available, still gone with Leach, because you can't. He's not going to be bowling Nathan Lyon bowled the whole of the afternoon session or the middle session today, whole of one session, bottled up an end, was threatening enough, got a bit of spin and bounce, and then when the tailenders came in, they weren't equipped to deal with it. Leach isn't going to be doing that, but with Root in tandem, the two of them, I think you could figure out a way to get 12 overs out of him, 15 overs out of him, and do effectively what Stuart Broad's doing, but maybe be more threatening against the right-handers in the Australian side and some of the tailenders.
Any left-handers just going to try and take him out of the attack.
Yeah, right, I get this, but I do think as well, at this particular venue, you're going into it and you're knowing you might have to carry him for a portion of the test. He might not be a huge threat. But I think the spin and the bounce was such today that you wouldn't have really been able to go down the wicket. I think you'd have had... I don't think you'd have got them out, and I think they'd have probably still milked him, but he would have been more effective than completely ineffective.
Yeah, maybe. But the broader point I'm trying to make as well is that if you look at the spinners who generally have succeeded in the last decade in Test cricket, because I've had a look at it, it's all the ones with the best numbers. So your Ashwins, your Jadejas, your Lions. They're not ineffective against their bad matchups. They're still competent against their bad matchups, and that's what England lack. And maybe Matt Parkinson might be a better option.
Well, this is the where I go with this as the final point, is that we don't know who England's second best spinner after Leach is, because they played somebody who wasn't their second best spinner for 15 tests. They used all of the Don Best opportunities on. If they'd gone to Danny Bruce or whoever, you'd have an understanding of who might have a translatable game, but we don't, because they decided.
Amar Virdi was being talked as someone around the squad a little while ago, and he disappeared probably because he's too unfit. But there were other names that were around, and we just stuck with Don Bess for.
In my opinion, Virdi is a far better spinner than Don Bess, but
Don Bess can bat a bit.
That's the whole problem, and because their batting's crap, they have no choice.
That's why Chris Wokes. What about Don Bess for Chris Wokes in the side? What about that?
Well, no, because then you're not having a discernible improvement in your batting. And that's the ultimate problem as well. When you look at England's collapsing, the fact that they got 36 wickets 36 runs for 6 wickets. If you take out the four guys who scored double figure, and that includes 7 extras as well. So really 29 for 6. You've got Robinson, Broad, and Anderson, who are all number 11s.
Yeah.
And look at the Australia innings, right? First innings. Stark, 39 off 39. Nisa, 35 off 24. Richardson, 9 off 3. When was the last time England's 8, 9, and 10 have done that? Even when Archer was playing, he was no good really with a bat.
They're pants, aren't they?
So
Wokes gets runs, but that's it.
So when you're assessing, so Wokes at 8 is better than Stark at 8, but the 9, 10, 11 are terrible with a bat, and their average was sub 12. I reckon.
I think Robinson's about 12, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it was 10.5.
I'm not talking about career averages. We know that Broad could bat at some point in his career. Yeah. Obviously, there's an issue now. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there was never any chance that Broad and Anderson were going to score 39 and 35 like Stark and Nisa did to try and avoid potentially a follow-on. No chance whatsoever.
No. But this is like the thing is, England. It's England's muddled thinking of Chris Wokes is in the side because he can score 24 like he did today. He probably average. He batted well and average what you'd expect him to do. But the flip side was that he bowled 23.4 overs and took 1 for 103. So where's the net benefit of having that approach? You just need to rethink.
I think he's better than that.
He is better than that, but probably not in Australia, in Adelaide.
In Australia. I don't see what he... I like him. I think he can keep an end kind of tight when batters are playing sensibly. But they're junk overs. They're Malali maidens to that expression. We've got a couple of Patreon questions, and then we'll see if we can get some on Twitter before we wrap up the show. Adam Dallimore says, does Root need practice on leaving the ball? So frustrating that he feels the need to just dangle the bat out at wide balls. Such a nothing shot. Do you think Cameron Green is do you think he sees Cameron Green as the fourth seamer to get on top of Max? Do you want to answer that?
I sort of repeat what I said earlier, and I think there's possibly Root might have a slight issue with the sort of the height of Cameron Green and wanting to get bat on ball and that kind of thing. So maybe he needs to not like generally practice leaving the ball, because I'm not going to suggest that Joe Root should go away and improve the way he bats, especially after what he's done this year. But perhaps he needs to maybe get a feel for how to play Cameron Green a bit better, because obviously he's never played him before. Like he's new to the scene. He's coming at it from a ridiculous height, so it's a new thing. So perhaps he needs to think about how he best plays Cameron Green when he's attacking that off stump. But the general point, I think I'll let him steer the ball to third man for four as much as he likes.
Yeah, and then we have one from VJ. Hello. My question is a podcast. My first question is a podcasting one. How do you people get motivated every day to talk about England team when they?
Because it's really funny.
It is kind of funny, isn't it? Yeah. I find myself very disappointed after every test loss. You get used to it, don't you, if you support England?
Yeah.
It's mainly what we do. The second question.
It's a very English thing, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't support England. I think it's funny.
Yeah. Secondly, is playing too many tests in the last 2 years? Is it a problem for England that they're playing too many tests in the last 2 years? English batters find themselves constantly under a lens and have no time to bounce back from bad form. What do you think about that one, Dan?
Well, if you follow the argument of the traditionists that we don't play enough red ball cricket in county cricket, then it must be a good thing that we play so many tests. But unfortunately, that's just an agenda that they like to follow to try and get what they want. So I don't really have a view either way, to be honest with you.
What I would say,
usually if you practice something, you become better at it. So I mean, that's usually a thing. So I don't subscribe to the fact that because we play so many tests, we're not very good. I think that our main problem is that we play so many tests against the best teams, and so we're not allowing our batters to stat pad at all.
That is probably true. And you play in England, so even bad bowlers look good.
Negative England tax, yeah.
I think there is a little bit of a truth in here, in that if you play 17 tests a year, what's that? That's 56. That's nearly 100 days of cricket, just under 85 days of cricket in theory. You've got like preparation, travel, etc. to get to that. What I think it means is that if you have a problem, you don't have that much time to work on it. So we're talking about Pope not being good against spin. He's spending half his time out in the field, or sat, and at least half the rest of the time sat in the changing room. When is he
thinking about what he's done?
Yeah, when probably 90% of the rest of his time sat in the changing room. When is he supposed to go to the nets with a few net bowlers and somebody who, I don't know, who's the best English player of spin, Joss Butler or something like that, and talk to them about how his technique works. Like, how do you pick up length better? Where do you look to score? What happens if you go down the wicket and you're beaten in the flight? What's your get out? What's your bail out? He has to just get ready for the MCG test now, where he'll either be running drinks and not practicing, or playing and getting out.
There's also an argument there that the bubble thing doesn't help as well. So, like, when you're in the bubble, you can't suddenly pop out the bubble to go and try and practice against spin. You're stuck in the bubble. So that exacerbates the sort of point you're making as well. So I think in the current situation of playing lots of test cricket and having no recourse for getting out, it's even harder to try and work on those things.
Here's a question for you, Dan. VJ Ruban from Twitter this time asks, how many of this England team would be in an all-combined team between both sets of players? I've got 3.
Okay, I'm going to go... Okay, so are we looking at this game here?
Yeah, and they have to line up 1v1, 2v2, 3v3. So I think
this test, or with Australia's best team with Cummins and Hazelwood as well? That's important.
Well, either. Answer it how you want.
Okay, so I'm going to go with Cummins and Hazelwood available.
Yeah, cool. They're in my team.
I go with Root.
Yep.
Somewhere, I don't care where he'll play. Just shove him in at 5 over Travis Head. I don't care. And I'd go for Stokes over Cameron Green, although I think that will change in the not too distant future.
Yeah.
Apart from that,
I think Marcus Harris maybe doesn't make it.
Well, who you pick Hamid or Burns over
I
him?
probably would, yeah. I think that I've got a really low opinion of Marcus Harris. If you
I
average
know-
23 in Australia, and you're in Australia and you play half your matches in Australia, you're not good.
He's decent, mate. Trust me, he's decent.
He's definitely not
Put
decent.
it this way, he outscored Hamid considerably in county cricket.
Yeah, but this is a different ball game. I think he's
there's a like comparison.
absolutely.
But which version of Hamid did he outscore? Did he outscore
He's an
OG
absolute
Hamid
walking
or?
wicket. I mean, he'll probably get about 500 tomorrow against demoralised England and keep it.
All
That
he
might not be the
needs is
worst
for
thing.
me. All he needs is for me to say it's forgettable.
Yeah. Ashes disaster bingo. I reckon Nisa's going to get a ton as a night watchman as well. So
I think that could be funny. I think Robinson's there or thereabouts as a bowler as well, but probably not better than the three Aussies.
Yeah, I'll go with
that. Dan asks, this is a good one on Twitter. Would I have got more enjoyment out of setting fire to the money I spent on a BT Sports subscription? Max.
No, because you also get the Champions League, so that's fun.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah.
What happens if Dan doesn't like football?
Oh well, if Dad doesn't like football, then then yeah, he's stuffed, isn't he? You could always. It's quite enjoyable to listen to the commentators spout absolute horseshit. I mean, that's been enjoyable. You know, as bad as England's performance is going to be, the commentators on BT Sport will be worse.
And we'll finish with one more, unless anyone saw another one that they want to answer. We'll do that in a second. From Nick, how many players from this England team? How many players would England need from the Andy Flower era, 2012 #1 team in the world, to have a chance in this series? He said to win this series, but I think to have a chance. I think you'd need both openers and Trott.
Yeah.
So that's 3. You'd need probably Peterson. I think you can afford to take
Swan.
Bell over Pope as well. So Root is the only survivor.
definitely only one out of the top 6.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the top 6. You probably take Pryor over Butler, so that's 6. If you had that as a top 7, England would have a chance with the bowlers they've got now. I think they would lose. I don't think they'd
play Mark Wood enough.
Yeah, but I think they'd have a chance. You'd put Swan in, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Although Swan's record in Australia is not good, by the way. People talk it up. He bowled one very good spell at Adelaide, but he averages in the 40s, and even on the good tour he averaged 40. So it's not when Swan tells you about how good he was in Australia. No, took 10 wickets or something in the whole series. But you would have Swan in as a spin option, and then I don't know who were even the seamers back then.
Bresnan,
Tremlett,
Finn.
Well, you take Robinson for those guys, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's a bit of a muchness with the bowling, but yeah, that's a lot.
So what's that, 6 then?
You'd need an entire top order.
6 or 7. Yeah.
Right, shall we wrap up there, fellas, or anything?
Yeah, is it right to answer a couple of questions I got?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So first of all, rather like Marcus Harris is in your sights, Jack, at the moment. Josh Butler appears to be in quite a few people's sights on Twitter.
Yes. We're coming back round to Josh Butler should be dropped for Ben Folkes season, which means he's going to score a pointless 80 in the second innings.
Keep himself going for the next couple of series. Yeah. I mean, there was no evidence to suggest that the Butler was going to be an above-average Test batter before he got his recall from Ed Smith. And I still don't think there's any evidence now that he's an above-average Test batter. The question is whether the net value of Folkes, batting plus keeping is higher than Josh Butler, or you can ask the same question for Bairstow too.
No,
it's probably I would say Folkes probably lean towards, but I don't think it's a conclusive argument. I don't think Folkes will average any higher than 30 in Test cricket either. So you're picking, maybe he might save a good few in the field, and that's probably going to be good enough. But it's not like there's like an outstanding candidate breaking down the door trying to.
It's not going to be the difference maker, is it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like this, like picking Butler at the moment is a shambolic decision based on what there is behind him. Maybe it's a niche thing. Yeah, 6 and 2 threes, maybe a bit better than 6 and 2 threes, I think, for Folkes, but not much. And the other questions that I've I'm going to paraphrase them a little bit because they're all kind of related a little bit. The one question is, England's basically, they're saying that England's batting order is just not good enough. We know that. We've spoken about that. What do England have to do to address this situation? Do they bring in new players or persist with the same players, hoping they will come good? And then there's also a similar question where, are we at the stage now where tests and T20s are practically two different sports? And it's actually pretty related, because I think now it comes to a point where we have to say, someone like Butler, if you're going to pick folks, you give folks a couple of years minimum, right? And say to Butler, just go and do what you're good at, which is white ball cricket. Go play
You'd assume
ODIs,
ODIs,
go play 20Is, go play IPL, whatever leagues you want to play in around the world. Just do what you're good at.
You'd assume he'll be the next white ball captain as well.
Well, yeah.
How much work do you want him to do?
Yeah, well, exactly. You can't play 3 formats and around the world, living in bubbles, and expect someone to sustain a high level of performance. They're not robots. They're not machines. You can't expect them to do that. So I think just for workload and sticking to what you're good at, he's just going to play white ball cricket. Now, regarding England and kind of their addressing of their problems, whether they bring in new players and stuff, I don't think that there's any real cabs off the rank who will do any better with the bat, at least. I mean, and I kind of I've made some notes in advance, because I think it's actually really important to try and understand the reasons why there aren't many good options for England to pick with the bat, and we're having to stick with these guys because whilst they're pretty mediocre, there's not really anyone that's any better. And I'm not a buyer of the county championship issues or scheduling issues at all. Like I said earlier, I think they're just arguments that are given by traditionalists to try and push their own agendas.
But the arguments that there isn't enough red ball cricket.
Either enough, or it's shoved to the end of the season when they want to see it played in July or whatever. They're just bitter and resentful about white ball cricket because they never had that when they first started watching it. Basically, that's my opinion. Now, when you look at some of the other issues that are available to discuss, if you're a player, right? Say you're 15 years old and you're a talented batter, right? The financial incentives are for you to be good at white ball cricket, not red ball cricket. You're going to make a lot more money in your career being good at white ball cricket than you are at red ball cricket. So if I was a player, I'd be focusing on white ball, and I think that players will do that, and that's fine. That's their decision. So you have to rationalise that. Secondly, county championship. How many games are played in front of big crowds? A handful at best. Maybe a couple of festivals and small out grounds are pretty packed. Even so, there's probably only a few thousand spectators. The crowds don't watch much red ball domestic cricket. There's no crossover from one environment to the other. So how does playing in front of a few hundred people prepare yourself for playing in front of 50,000 people at the MCG or whatever, you know? It just doesn't happen. So when you compare it to football, yeah, when you're playing at Wembley, you're playing in front of like 80,000 fans if you're playing for England. But Tottenham, Manchester United, they all have the same stadium, the same size stadiums, you know, and they're all packed. So you've got that previous experience of that intimidating environment. And you don't have that in county cricket. The next point I'm trying to make as well is that it's mutually exclusive for a county to be successful and provide players to England at the same time. What benefit really is there for counties to create England players as opposed to players who are almost good enough to play for England, guys who bowl 75, 80 mile an hour and succeed in English conditions? So maybe a way of England addressing that would be to pay a really big amount to counties for developing like regular core test match players. So, for example, player plays on 10 appearances for the test team, the county gets £1 million. The county that produces them gets £1 million. They play 50 games, they get £2 million. Whatever it is, provide an incentive for the counties not to produce 75 or 80 mile an hour bowlers who are going to take an absolute ton of wickets in favourable conditions in English summer, but who can't play well in Test cricket because the conditions are completely different. Give them a reason to produce England players, because at the moment they're just doing it out of pride. They're not doing it out of anything else apart from they want to maximise their best the players to play for England. But then the counties have got no incentive. Why would you produce a player for England when you're not going to ever play? I mean, how many games does Ben Stokes play for Durham? How many games does Jimmy Anderson play for Lancashire? Barely ever. Ollie Robinson the same. Sussex will hardly ever see him now. So what's the point? You may as well just get a guy who bowls 80 mile an hour who's going to take you 50 wickets at an average of 20 in the English conditions, but who's got no chance of making Test cricket because he's bowling too slow. Yeah, because you're going to have every single team.
Or prior to a few years ago, just sign a coal pack.
Well, exactly. There's easy, quick solutions for counties that don't benefit the national team. So the next thing I want to say is that I feel like the Red Bull management group, in my opinion, appears to be pretty unaccountable and either unwilling, unable, or both to embrace marginal gains and employ non-ex-players in their think tank. Now, that's another major problem, I think, because we've discussed this so many times. Strategically, they're not strong at all. They make the wrong decisions a lot. And this isn't hindsight, as I think Joe Root mentioned hindsight in a press conference recently. That it's not hindsight. People are now calling this stuff in advance. Yeah, there's plenty of people who do after time. There's plenty of people who call it in advance too. I've written about this for years, and we've spoken about this so many times on here, and yet it just nothing changes. And then finally, maybe another reason is worth thinking about as well. Maybe it's just a poor generation of players. This happens sometimes. You don't get a golden generation every 5 or 10 years. You get some players a group of players who just aren't good enough. And then maybe in 10 years' time, you get a group of players who are like the golden generation. This stuff happens. It happened in English football. It could easily happen in English cricket. So there's a few reasons, I think, as to why England have got a bit of a lack of talent at the moment. And why, unfortunately, the players who are the next cabs in the rank are going to be no better than what we've got already. I mean, people on Twitter tagging me in tweets saying, "Oh, what about Bracey?" And I'm like, "Well,
we saw him.
He's barely. I don't think he's. I don't
Three
think
ducks.
he's even really played in Division 1 in county cricket yet. So
3 ducks and can't catch.
So I mean, for me, if he goes and go and get 1,000 runs in Division 1 next season, and then we'll talk. At the moment, it's like picking a League One player to play for England in football. Why would you do that?
Right,
I don't know about you, Jack, but it all sounds very promising.
Yeah, we are going to wrap up because I want to keep this under an hour. Which is
sorry for the little bit of a rant
right.
there.
No, that's
but,
good.
Yeah.
That's good. If you're watching on YouTube, hit like, hit subscribe. We're on the road to 10,000 subs so that Ross can start selling his T-shirt line.
Yeah.
On the
Apparently, I'm roped in for designing those.
Yes. Max and I will design our T-shirt line, is what Ross said, which means Max will do it because Max is the only person that can draw, and Ross will Google how do I make T-shirts. That's yeah.
Ross is the businessman.
Yeah.
Send in your T-shirt designs, and I'll see what I can do.
Yeah. Right. Let's so do that. Hit subscribe if you're watching. Or if you're listening, same deal. Subscribe, follow at the Cricket Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Hit a bell icon if you see it. That's always good. And we will be back tomorrow. Believe it or not, I think we're gonna have a day 5.
Yeah, I think we are.
We didn't even talk about when Australia are going to declare. Just before tea.
That's why there will be a day 5 unless he can get rolled in the session.
Yeah. Right. See you later, everyone. Bye bye.